This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cavills.
This episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, check out our friends Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. And finally, you want to eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off and use code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Greg, let's start with the Hall of Fame. 3 Patriots Hall of Fame finalists were announced earlier today. They are Julian Edelman, Logan Mankins, and Adam Vinatieri. You're a fan. Who are you voting for?
Oh, man. That's rough.
Yeah.
I mean, all those guys are going to be in. They're deserving to be in. Absolutely, all of them. In that case, like, I'm going with, oldest first. Like, who's first in line? And to me, that's Adam Vinatieri. And I think there would be a great sort of, symbolism with Parcells going in at the same time. Parcells coached Vinatieri, if not drafted him. I don't remember the circumstances how he came into the league. I would prefer to see Vinatieri go in now, Mankins next, and then Julian Edelman. We all know they're going to go in. We all know their place in Patriots history. 3 outstanding players. I think Vinatieri and will definitely get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think that Mankins definitely has a shot to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Listeners to this podcast know I'm not high on Julian Edelman's Hall of Fame candidacy. I mean, great player, especially in the postseason, but just not, when we're talking about elite dominating guys. So I would really like to see Vinatieri go in this time. How are you?
Yeah, I'm with you. Who do you think the fans pick?
I think they're going to pick Edelman.
Yeah, me too.
I really do. Recency bias, and he's still talking about the Patriots. He's still front and center. He's got the podcast and whatever with Gronk, and I think it's going to be Edelman. Which is, I mean, I'm not going to argue with it because he does deserve to get in, but I'd really like to see Adam get in first.
Do you think, Greg, that how good Stephen Gostkowski was when Vinatieri left? Do you think that took a little bit of the shine off Vinatieri and how really good he was? Like, could you imagine if the Patriots went from like Vinatieri to Rohrwasser or Chad Ryland? Like, I think it kind of softened the blow, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But, to see what Adam still continued to do with the Colts was impressive. And then, you have to talk about, like, what was it? The first 3 Super Bowls, he had the game-winning kicks, or at least 2 of them. So I just think, like, Adam's career was just outstanding. We know how Bill felt about him, talking about, I think it was that 2001 team. He said that the kicker was the best player on the team, and that team won a Super Bowl. So that's pretty high praise.
I'll never forget being at Charlie O's near URI, the bar, watching Vinatieri. And that snowball game against the Raiders with my brother and friends. So many memories with Vinatieri. Just so many big kicks.
I didn't know where you were going with that. I was I thought it was going to be like watching him eat a plate of chicken wings. He was elite at that. That's where I thought we were going with this.
Drinking heavily with my brother watching the Raiders game.
Yeah.
All right. So Garrett Bradbury spoke with the media earlier today, Greg. And he mentioned that Drake Maye is expected to handle a lot of the pre-snap communication. How much do you think McDaniels puts on Maye's plate right away?
Not a ton. I think Josh is really good at this, and we saw it a little bit with, Drake Maye. Cam Newton had to handle some things, because it is the offense. It definitely looked different under Cam. But I think it's going to be piecemeal. But I can tell you from talking to people around the team since these workouts started, and just to be clear, I wasn't clear last time we talked. the coaches can definitely meet with the players.
Yeah.
I think they're allowed to be at the facility for 4 hours, on the field for 90 minutes. Probably, another half an hour to either get ready or take off their stuff. So, about 2 hours, 90 minutes worth of meeting time. And from what I hear, both Drake Maye and Josh Dobbs, their ability to absorb this offense is off to a very strong start. They think that they have two quarterbacks that are extremely smart, that will be able to pick this up. And there is no qualms, no hesitation about Drake Maye being able to handle anything at this point. But it's still going to be important, Nick, to not get ahead of yourselves. You don't want to have any regressions. So it's baby steps forward, but so far, so good.
Yeah, Joshua Dobbs, not surprised that he's a very smart guy, since his nickname is the Pastronaut. And he is obsessed with space exploration along with football. So pretty smart guy. I've heard Phil Perry talk about this, Greg. I want to get some details from you. Even though Maye and Dobbs haven't been able to speak to McDaniels about football, if that's actually happening, if that was a thing before this week, they do have the library, right? A video that Maye can go through. He can go back to the Brady years and look at a lot of the stuff that they did. He could look at the Mac Jones stuff from 2021. So he could still get a grasp of this offense before sitting down and hammering details out with McDaniels, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, these iPads that they have now are just ridiculous teaching tools. So as soon as they got it set, and it probably wouldn't take very long, and they can alter things, like they press a button and the playbook's uploaded. You have the ability to, tag video with a certain play, whether it's Tom Brady or, like you said, like Mac Jones or whatever. And so Drake Maye can, go through the playbook, and Josh Dobbs go through the playbook, see this play, they're going to start with their basic plays and things like that, the foundational plays of this offense. And they are going to be able to press a button and watch the video and watch different clips of how that play was executed. And, I think we've heard Drake Maye allude to this about, being able to watch, Tom Brady. I mean, there's so much stuff on these iPads that these guys have access to. And I know, Drake's been digging into it, which we would all expect. And so it's these guys, I would say, like, the difference between now and like 20 years ago, what these guys can do in the offseason is just night and day. And Drake is taking advantage of it.
Speaking of Bradbury, just a quick question. Do you think the Patriots draft a center?
I don't know if it's on their wish list, Nick, but if the board lines up and there's a center that they really like and the value is there, then, absolutely. I mean, I'll be interested to see. I mean, I don't think he's going to get out of the first round, but we've talked about it from the Senior Bowl and stuff. But, one of my binkies is Greg Bedard out of North Dakota State, and I think he can play all three. He played tackle in college, but he's going to be an interior guy. He can play all three interior positions. I love him. I mean, just the thought of, say, getting Will Campbell to be your left tackle and then Greg Bedard to be your left guard / who knows, maybe center of the future. I mean, the big boy would be feeling himself on draft night. I'd be like, I'd be over the moon.
That's why I said, oh boy, I could see you sweating. I could see you sweating over those thoughts of Campbell and Zabel. You'd lose your mind. Of course, the guy that's going to keep coming up at that position is Drew Kendall, who played at Boston College because of the Bill O'Brien, Doug Marrone, groupthink, and the fact that Vrabel is close to both of those guys. So he's somebody that you look at maybe, I don't know, somewhere in the 5th round, 7th round, because the Pats don't have a 6th round pick. All right, before we get to Antonio Gibson, who said a couple of very interesting things I want to ask Greg about, and Greg also has some intel, not a ton, but some intel about the voluntary workouts this week. Before we get to that, Greg wants to tell you all about Prizepicks.
Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks. I'll be dialing it up this weekend, with the big golf tournament that's going on. Not sure whether we can say the name or not, and I don't like to be sued, but I am going to be all over that this weekend, sitting down, hitting more or less to see what happens this weekend and grab a little cash. I'm very excited for it. Prizepicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The app is really easy to use. Love the app. It's really fast. Create a lineup. All you do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. Of course, they have baseball going, hockey, basketball. Is Jaylen Brown going to play in these last 2 games? Stuff like that. The second half of the basketball season is here. It's coming to the end, and the race to the playoffs is heating up and getting hot on Prizepicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. And, of course, the playoffs are coming. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game.
Antonio Gibson met with the media after Bradbury met with the media today, and he was talking about Drake Maye. He said there's a big difference in Drake Maye this time around versus last year, and the top thing that he mentioned was leadership qualities. Greg, how big of a step is year 2 for Drake Maye if he wants to eventually become the guy that many of us think he could become if he continues to fulfill that potential?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, it's easy to say it's huge. I'm just I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. I'm enthusiastic about seeing Drake Maye in year 2, and this really goes for any top draft pick that's going from rookie year to year 2. I mean, it's just such a whirlwind for these guys from the end of their college season, and then they're going into training for the combine and the draft process, and then all these workouts. You're flying all over the place. You finally get drafted. Then you're coming into a new team, a new coaching staff. Now Drake has a second coaching staff. I think just he came to a foreign place last year. He's sort of been a North Carolina guy his whole life. He comes to New England, probably isn't sure what to expect. And now he knows exactly what to expect. And now he also has Mike Vrabel. He has Josh McDaniels. He has, Thomas Brown, Ashton Grant, all these guys at his disposal, and guys that he knew that he played with last year who are back. Like, I think it's just the comfort level and a lot of the BS being gone. I think it's I'm very optimistic about Drake in year 2. I was certainly impressed with him in year 1 and know that he hasn't come close to reaching his ceiling. And I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2.
He's the guy. Last year, we knew that he was going to be the guy, but we didn't know when he was going to get his first game under his belt. Would they wait until week 10, week 12? We had no idea. Well, now he steps into camp. He steps into even voluntary workouts this week. He knows he's the guy. He's QB1. He's franchise quarterback. Joe Milton was traded. Not to say that he thought Joe Milton was going to, endanger his spot, but it's clear. It's clear this is his team, and he can take ownership of it now. There's no delicateness. Don't say the wrong thing because you've got to respect Jacoby Brissett, who's going to start the year. There's none of that. This is his show. He knows it's his show, and I think that will give him extra confidence. Speaking of Antonio Gibson, though, one of my biggest issues, Greg, with Alex Van Pelt last year was he didn't utilize Gibson enough in the passing game. Gibson is really freaking good as a receiver, and he talked about that today and said that he believes his receiving ability should show itself more with McDaniels. Do you agree with Gibson?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think it's just like sort of the quote unquote, third down back out of the backfield thing. I think that, Antonio Gibson with, his skills, his build, if I remember correctly, I think he was a wide receiver at some point, maybe in college. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting them confused.
No, I believe he was. I'll look it up, but I do believe he was.
Yeah. And so, I think especially, knowing the way McDaniels likes to operate and how he loves to piece things together and use guys in different roles, especially for different game plans. Like, we're all, sorry, we're all of a sudden going to surprise this team. And like, now Antonio Gibson's going to be the slot receiver for the Patriots in this matchup. Like, I totally believe that. Now we also need to leave it open that, they could draft a guy, they could sign a guy, and we'll have to see exactly how his role develops.
Yeah, Antonio Gibson did play wide receiver at Memphis. He played wide receiver for 2 years. He played in 28 games. He started 11 of them, had 44 catches, over 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I remember the same as you, but I just wanted to make sure with 100% certainty so people aren't yelling at us in the comments. He did play receiver for 2 years at Memphis. All right, voluntary workouts. We've talked about it a little bit so far today, Greg. Any intel? What are you hearing about the guys this week?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, and I guess there was some sort of footage of Vrabel that was posted by Patriots Espanol or whatever. I don't know if that was Paulo Perillo's doing or what on that side. But, you heard of some of Vrabel's address to the team, which was basically sort of the basics and the accountability. And, I definitely liked, what I heard, sort of like old school about like, leaving your phone, taking your, no hoods up, stuff like that. Like, just sort of baseline professionalism in any day and age, even today. So that was good. But I would say some of the things that I'm hearing, and it's not breaking news or anything like that, but basically the message from the coaches from Vrabel on down to their various rooms was playtime's over. Like, what you can, and there's more and more stuff about that. It's become clear that last year was pretty much a clown show behind the scenes, with the coaching staff and the coaches basically saying like all the crap you guys got away with last year, all the little stuff you blew off or you weren't held accountable for, that stuff's over. Like, everybody needs to be on top of their job. Everybody needs to be a professional. And if you don't want to be one, and if you aren't one in practice, you're going to be gone. And so I think that the message has gone through. I've heard that the guys that they have signed, that they've brought in, have been exactly so far, and it's early, of course, have been exactly what they thought and what they hoped for in terms of leaders, professionalism, bringing stability to the room that they are in. It's been great across the board. I think that, having Mac Hollins and Stephon Diggs there has already made a big impact on the wide receiver room. From what I hear, the guys are picking everything up on both sides of the ball very quickly. They're impressed with what they've seen so far in terms of, how they think about the scheme on both sides of the ball. What else can I tell you? I'm trying to think. I told you about the quarterbacks, extremely smart, very impressed. But, I would say,
anything about the second-year guys, Greg? Anything about Polk, Baker, Wallace? Anything being said about those guys?
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is I think that the impression so far is that Polk is picking up the offense quickly. Other younger guys, I would say that hasn't been the case. I would say it's a little bit slower. I think that, there's a lot to be proven and we'll see, because we have to remember the coaches are learning how these players learn, and every player is different. And so They might be teaching it one way this week. They might get done with the guys, talk about it after and say, all right, well, this isn't going to work for this guy, so we're going to teach it a different way. But I would say that so far of the younger guys, I would say that Polk has made the best impression so far. And I'm not talking about on-field stuff. I'm just talking about, professionalism, learning the offense, things like that. Thumbs, arrow pointing up on Jalen Polk.
It makes me think, I was just thinking about this as you were talking. We've looked at Vrabel coming in and this idea of Sergeant Vrabes is here and he's going to kick out the riffraff, which is absolutely a thing. in part of what he's going to do this year. But when we look at players, I think sometimes we look at a Jelani Tavai, for example, or a Jalen Polk, and we say, oh, well, Tavai said what he said last year, wasn't very good on the football field. Off the field, he was even worse with some of those comments. Polk was lost, social media. And I think, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, Greg. I look at those guys and I say, all right, when's Vrabel going to get rid of them? But there's another way that you can look at it. You can look at it that, hey, maybe Tavai and Polk need somebody like Vrabel. And maybe that change to Vrabel will get Tavai back on the tracks. Maybe the change to Vrabel and McDaniels will get Polk back to the guy who they thought they were drafting. I'm not saying, on the field with Polk, we'll see what happens. But as far as character goes, everything that you read about Polk before the draft was, this guy's a hard worker. He gets it. Good teammate. There weren't really any red flags, if any. Maybe there was one or two, but not many. Mm-hmm. So maybe we look at it at the other way and we say, is it actually good for these guys? And maybe Tavai kind of gets back to who he was before last year, and maybe the Vrabel change is best for Polk.
Yeah, I agree on Polk. With Tavai, I just don't see the fit, and what they're going to do. And I think, depending on what happens in the draft, if they get an edge guy at some point or somebody that is versatile, that could take Tavai's place, I still think that's going to happen. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that change. Obviously, we knew what happened last year, and it went off the rails for a guy like Jalen Polk, along with others. And these coaches all have a very good track record, and that should make people optimistic about any turnaround we might see.
Greg and I saw a video on social media today. We both commented on that video. We will get to it in our thoughts, but first, Greg wants to tell you about our friends at Gametime.
It's that time of year. The weather's getting a little bit better. It was freaking brutal the other day. Yeah, good luck being at Fenway this week. But pretty soon, it's going to get a little warmer next week, in the 60s. Pretty soon, you're going to want to get out to Fenway. You got the playoffs at TD Garden for the Celtics, not the Bruins. You have all sorts of stuff going on, and you got to be there in person to really appreciate the sport that you're passionate about. And the best place to find a way in is Gametime. They have Gametime picks. The curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. They have all that stuff. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get panoramic views from your seat in the app before you buy. I have to see that. That's a must for me. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Pretty soon we'll know the Celtics playoff schedule. You're going to have to get on there. Gametime's definitely going to show you the best way to get in. You're going to have to pounce on it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
There's a video out there of Bill Belichick working with his players on the field at UNC. Greg, what'd you think?
I didn't think that was Bill Belichick. I think it was like AI Bill Belichick or something like that. He's like telling one of the refs like how great he was doing and how, nobody makes calls as good as you, or, stuff like that. And like, he's like having patience to like teach these kids. I mean, look, I'm sure Bill had a lot of that. And obviously this stuff is being curated a certain way and clipped up, probably like Michael Lombardi's probably on his laptop, like cutting this stuff up to make Bill look the best possible. But it was kind of like grandfatherly Bill Belichick being out there. And so I was just like, I don't know who this is. And it's probably AI Bill Belichick.
I loved it. I love seeing people do what they love to do in any walk of life. And that's what I loved about this video, is that Bill Belichick is a coach, man. And he loves coaching. He would coach until probably he's on his deathbed. And he might be coaching from his deathbed. And so to see him back in his element, and it's like, it was just great. It was great to see somebody who has passion for what they're doing back doing what they want to do. And his media stuff was fun, but Bill Belichick, he deserves to be on a football field somewhere, whether it's the NFL or college, couldn't care less. He should be out there teaching people because that's what he loves to do. And I also just loved it even more because of what you mentioned. When you watch the video, it's about 2 minutes long, and Greg quote tweeted it. I quote tweeted it. His handling of the players. I just loved watching it because I just thought to myself, yeah, it's great coaching the all-time great like Tom Brady and all the awesome players that came in and working with, guys that are coming from college. But Belichick, I'm sure there's a part of him, and we always just see him as, outside of the yoga on the beach, and then these great pictures with his wonderful, lovely young girlfriend. But I'm sure there's a part of Belichick that genuinely loves this opportunity to grab 17, 18-year-old football players and really teach them, what's going to make them successful at the next level. I'm sure there's a piece of him that is genuinely excited to go to work every day, not just because of his love of football, but to work with these young guys. And he's talking to the quarterback, and he's talking about which routes that you got to hit to be successful. And you could just see the kids are just like soaking it up like freaking sponges. So I thought it was great. I thought it was an awesome video. And yes, it was clipped, and I'm sure it's been, manufactured to a point to make him look as good as he can look. But I still I loved watching it, seeing a guy happy again, doing what he loves to do, and working with the younger guys and having that opportunity. You had a conversation. You had an opportunity with Michael Holley on television last night, and you guys had a little bit of a back and forth. There's this conversation of cap space, cash spending. Greg, you fall on one side of that. Please describe to the people how you feel regarding the Patriots have X amount of cap space right now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's not the number, and we've talked about this before. The number is the cash. Like, these NFL front offices, they don't get a budget from their owner saying like, you have X amount of cap space. This is how much you can spend of your cap space. I mean, because you can manipulate that cap space any way you want. I mean, if you have a bunch like the Patriots do right now, and they have done this to an extent, and I think it's smart. They've front loaded these contracts because they have. If you do that, then you take more of a cap hit in year one. But anyways, the point of this, and I didn't have the numbers last night when I was on with Holly, but I now have the numbers. Through overthecap.com. And we've talked about this, about the 3-year increment. But basically, everybody talks about the Patriots spending. Okay. I just want to make clear that the Patriots, to this point, and it's going to be even more once the draft picks are included, the Patriots have spent the most money they ever have in terms of cash to this point. Okay. The Patriots right now, when you talk about when you add in their draft class, which is not included in over the cap's cash spending, I asked Jason Fitzgerald over there if that was indeed true, and he said yes. So to this point, the Patriots have spent $267 million in cash. The cap this year is $279. So right now they're quote unquote under their budget. But what you also have to realize is that this draft class, and I went back and I looked at last year's draft class. It was last year's draft class in the first year as rookies. Their cash was it was like about $35 million. I mean, a little bit north. I didn't count everybody, and Joe Milton's gone, so it's harder to see exactly what he got paid. But especially with the 4th overall pick, basically this draft class, what they're going to have, it's going to be at least $40 million in cash. So when you add that to what the Patriots have already spent, the Patriots basically to this point have spent $307 million. Now, people will look at the cash spending to this point. The Patriots are 17th right now. $307 million gets them up to 3rd. And like we know, like especially the Browns are up there with the Patriots in terms of, they have the pick in front of them or 2 picks in front of them. So their draft class is going to be expensive. But, basically people who say the Patriots are being cheap this year, it's just not true. They have never spent, I think even in 2021, they spent, I think it was, I have the numbers right here. 2021, that big, and they spent $52 million over the cap that year. That was $234 million that they spent this year. Last year, the Patriots spent $270 million. So right now, 2025 is lagging behind. Again, we haven't included the draft class yet, which is another $40 million. So I just wanted to state definitively, if you think the Patriots are being cheap this year, that is factually not true. They are at least going to be at $310 million after the draft. And I still think that they have the ability to go beyond that should something arise, some sort of trade. A new regime gets a draft pick. They really like him. They say this guy's expendable in the last year of his contract. The Patriots still have room to do that. So I just want to say to everybody who thinks the Patriots have been cheap this year, they weren't cheap last year. They are not cheap this year. They have spent, or will have spent, easily over $300 million on the team this year.
We've had the conversation about, was it Belichick? Was it Kraft? How the money was spent? You and I lean towards the Belichick side of it. Others lean towards the Kraft side of it. All I will say is this. Pre-Bill Belichick, the Patriots spent money. Hello, Drew Bledsoe. Post-Bill Belichick, 2 offseasons so far, guess what they've done? They've spent money. Greg brought up last year, I think you said it was $270 million spent.
Yep.
Let's not forget that they also had 80 to 90 million guaranteed, according to Burt Breer, on the table for Brandon Ayuk. If Ayuk said yes to that trade, they would have spent over $350 million last offseason. And they knew how much they spent when they offered that money to Ayuk. They knew how much money they had, right? Because they went through free agency, and you can calculate the draft because you know what slots you're in. So they knew how much money they were going to spend with or without Ayuk. And they spent a lot of money last year, and they were still willing to give Ayuk 80 to 90 million guaranteed. So all I can tell you is pre-Belichick, they spent money. Post-Belichick, they've spent big money the last 2 off seasons. So that's all I can tell you. I know what I understand what the prior 10 years say, and I understand. I get it. I understand. The numbers are the numbers, but the context is who was truly running the ship and what was the philosophy. And Greg and I have both said Belichick ran a tighter ship. He kept a closer eye on how much money people were making, and he was very conscious of not paying somebody above 25 million, for example, or whatever. And he was just very conscious of that kind of stuff. So all we can go off of is the last 2 off seasons. We said it last off season. We'll say it this off season. That's all you can do. And post Belichick, they've spent a ton of money. So, I mean, you might want to dust off those old takes and throw them in the garbage, at least for the next calendar year. All right. Before we get to
one more thing on that, Nick.
Sure.
Because everybody hears about there's the 90% salary cap floor that you have to spend in cash. You have to spend 90% over 3 years. And this is 2024, this one to 2026. The Patriots already, including this year's draft class, if they don't spend another dime, which of course they will next year, and on next year's draft class, this doesn't even include that. The Patriots right now, including this year's draft class, they're $48 million over the 90% salary cap floor. So they have already met that, and we haven't even gotten to year 3.
I love facts. Facts are so fun. Facts. They're so fun. They're a delight. They're a delight, especially when they support your opinions. They're an absolute delight. All right, we're going to get to a mailbag. But first, I wanted to ask you about one thing, Greg, to follow up what you said earlier this week, because I asked you on the last pod if you were sitting in the room, the draft was, that night, who were you picking at 4? And you said Will Campbell. I just want to follow that up because you had said you spoke to somebody. I don't know if it was a personnel guy, a scout. I forget the verbiage you used. But I was reading Jeremy Fowler yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And he wrote about the most polarizing prospects. And he wrote about Campbell being one of those guys. And he talks about Campbell being a consensus top 10 pick, projections that indicate stardom. But a couple of quotes here, 3 quotes from his sources. Let's start with a high-ranking personnel evaluator with an NFC team. Said, quote, he's going to be awesome, all-pro caliber guard, and if he's a tackle, he will be better than at least half the tackles in the NFL right off the bat. Don't overthink it. Would you agree right now with that assessment that even if Will Campbell is not a top-flight tackle, seeing what you've seen on film, the people that you've spoken to and spoken with, would you say that he could be better than half the tackles in the league day one?
100%. And that's sort of why I've landed on Campbell as my number 4 overall pick. So as long as Carter, who I still don't know whether the Patriots would take him due to his red flags and some questions about his character, or Travis Hunter. Will Campbell, is my pick for the Patriots. I think they really like him. Actually, I know they really like him. I know that they think he could play tackle. And even if he doesn't, he's still better. He's better than what they have. And he's at least league average at left tackle as soon as he gets into the league. And so I just think it's what that scout said, what that personnel guy said about don't overthink it. To me, that's where I am at this point. We're now 2 weeks out from the draft, where it's like they have a humongous hole to fill. We'll see if they fill it before the draft. I tend to doubt it, but who knows? Maybe they sign a Tyron Smith to plug the gap. But to me, I look at it and I just say they have one huge, and other people say wide receiver and this and that. I get it. But when we're looking at their team, they don't have an NFL average left tackle. Will Campbell gives them that in year one. We'll see what his future holds, but at least for year one, he's an upgrade. He's the guy that he would be the straw that stirs the drink in that room for 10 years. Sign me up for Will Campbell. I completely agree with that assessment.
An AFC executive in another comment said, Campbell's measurables was a thing for a while, but I think people have gotten over it. Is that the vibe that you get, that maybe early on in the process, it was almost like sticker shock when you hear about the arm length, when the official measurements come in, which, by the way, we can now say 33-inch arms, but the wingspan, do you think people have mostly gotten over that, Greg, the people that you speak with, or it was never a thing to the people that you've spoken with?
I mean, I think that, the combine length definitely opened eyes. We're just like, ooh, really? And then, now that we know the whole sort of measurements at the combine were off, I will maintain what I first reported before the combine. I think that Will Campbell's arms are 32 7/8. And to me, his movement skills, his toughness, his mind, makes up for that 1/8 of an inch. I don't think that 1/8 of an inch is a big deal, but I do think that the NFL has gotten over it because I think everybody realized the combine measurements were not right, and that Will Campbell, he's either 33 inches or just below, and you can live with it.
One last one, NFC personnel man. Quote, it's a concern, talking about Campbell's length. It's a concern that limits his ability in some way, and he gets beat on the inside edge a little bit, but he knows how to play. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't draft him because of arm length, unquote. I just wanted to ask you, Greg, because I've heard some differing things about Will Campbell's tape. Some people will say the tape's great. What he did in the SEC was great. He shut down some of the best, pass rushers. He had a good day against Jared Verse. He was very good against Shamar Stewart. Other people, I was watching Todd McShay's podcast with Mensch, and Mensch said, he thought, and McShay agreed with him, that the Campbell film was good, not great.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I would say it's not great. I would say it's better than good. But I think that the makeup, the personality that you think that he can get better. And also, you're also dealing with NFL offenses as opposed to, college offenses where, helping out a little bit is, built into what you do. You do it for everybody. Everybody does it. And so, and Josh McDaniels' ability to game plan. I mean, even if, let's say Will Campbell is a little deficient, and where the length probably will show up, is guys, speed rushers to the outside, but because he doesn't have 34-inch arms, he's got to set a little heavier to the outside to not get beaten around the edge. And then that leaves him open to, interior stuff. In the NFL, McDaniels, if he needs help, certainly getting with the program earlier on, put a tight end over that side, or, just chip with the running back and know that Campbell knows he has help, and he's so smart that he's going to realize that and play to it, be like, all right, I don't need to set heavy. I need to make sure I keep the inside. So it definitely shows up, but I'm not overly concerned about it.
One thing I'll remind people is when we talk about left tackle playing the NFL, we're all grading on a curve because, tackle position is very difficult to find in 2025, much more difficult than it was years ago, and it wasn't easy years ago. So always remember that, like, getting an above average left tackle is really good. And I know you're picking the guy at 4 and you might think, well, he's got to be a Hall of Fame guy. He's got to be an all pro. He's got to be alt. He might not be as good as alt, but if you got an above average guy in that spot, you should feel pretty good. All right, Greg, tell people why they should feel pretty good about Factor meals.
Because they're freaking delicious. That's why. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any activity. Busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. That's the one I use, and it's freaking delicious. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Like I've said before, I love how it comes. It comes packaged. It's in these freezer packs. Everything is ready. Just pop it in the refrigerator. Then you pop it in the microwave. And I got to tell you, the sauces, the seasoning is off the charts. It was completely unexpected, but it's like getting a really good restaurant meal right in your home. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off, and you use code Bedard50 off to get $50 off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Bedard50 off at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off to get $50 off plus free shipping on your first box.
Also, check out Bedard and Giardi at BSJ, $50 for the year. Tag teaming the Patriots coverage. You can download the Prizepicks app as well. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5 and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. CLNS is that code. $20 off your first purchase. All right, I have no idea what to expect here. We got about 5 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Greg has some mailbag questions. I usually have the mailbag questions, and I set Greg up, but Greg's running point. So let's see how this goes, everybody. We're gonna witness and feel this at the same time.
I'm versatile. Okay. A couple ones real quick. This one we kind of answered before when talking about Will Campbell and why I would do it. But Andy W. says, is there a realistic chance to move up to number 2 for Hunter? If so, what would you be willing to give up? I don't think so. I don't know if A, the Browns would do it. B, I'm not sure the Patriots would do it. I might do it. I might move up a spot. I don't know if I'm going up to 2. Considering everything that the Patriots have, I think the Patriots view Travis Hunter as, he certainly a great prospect with very high ceiling, even at receiver, but their feeling is he's raw. And so I think probably in the building, it's split a little bit, which, even if Hunter was available at 4, do they want to do that? I would say probably the Vrabel contingent probably wants to do it. We'll see if that ends up happening. But I think if you hooked up Josh McDaniels to True Serum and you asked him, if you could have your druthers right now, if you could get anything you wanted to at 4, what do you want? Do you want a receiver, or do you want an offensive lineman that can at least up the offensive line? He might not be a franchise left tackle, but he's going to help you somewhere and make you better. I think Josh McDaniels would definitely take the offensive lineman. I think that he has no qualms about what he has in the room and making that work, as we saw in 2021. I wouldn't say that was a killer group that he had, and especially considering that everybody was just about new to the offense other than Jacoby Myers, and he made it work. So I'm not really entertaining a move up for Travis Hunter. I mean, I love Travis Hunter. I would. I don't think the Patriots will consider it where they are.
Yeah, we'll see how much movement happens. Jason Light of the Bucks just said to the media, that there have been years where he thought about trading down more than others. He said this year it'll be about what happens and who falls to them. He doesn't foresee as many teams wanting to trade up across the league. So that could also be Jason Light trying to keep the price down if he wants to try to move up. But, I do think that's the general consensus, that not a lot of teams are going to try to move up. So it'll be interesting to see how much action happens in the first night of the draft.
Yeah. CDM 1998 says, Greg, if they draft Membu, should they try him out at left tackle or keep him at right tackle and ask Moses to flip to the left side? I do not like this plan at all. I'm sure it's an option. We're hearing some chatter about, I think even some mock drafts have put Membu at 4 to the Patriots. I really don't like. There's usually a reason, especially in college, that college coaches leave a guy at right tackle. And I'm sure the Patriots are looking into all that. I'm sure they have their answers. But if I'm drafting Membu at 4, well, certainly he's getting a tryout at left tackle. But I better believe that he's going to do it. I mean, they signed Morgan Moses. I don't really want to ask Morgan Moses at 34 years old to change sides, just be solid over there. I'm not crazy about the Membu thing. We saw how things went with Caden Wallace. I do think that they have hopes that he will be at the basis of swing tackle, if not, show the left tackle ability that Wolf talked about last year. But I don't, maybe in a trade down, but I don't like the idea of going with Membu, who's been a right tackle, at 4. I would rather go with Will Campbell and know that there's a ridiculously high floor on him, and we'll see about the ceiling.
All right, let's do one more. I'll give Greg some time to find that last question he wants to hit. I will update people on the Membu stuff. Matt Miller of ESPN recently wrote, I don't know if he wrote this or they transcribed it, whatever. We've been told to expect the best player available approach from the Patriots at number 4, as scouts have been saying that New England would be happy with either Hunter or Carter should they be available. But what if they aren't? Miller writes, keep an eye on Membu. The Patriots have done a lot of work on him, so Membu could be in play early. So that's just a little bit of an update there.
Okay. And Zaza is going to finish.
Zaza!
Yeah, it's going to finish this up here. And he has a little University of North Carolina hat as his little symbol over at BSJ among the members. And again, this is BSJ members every week. Me and Giardi, we each do a live Q&A. So really, your $50 membership, it pays for it really with the ability to ask us questions, and we answer all the questions. And that goes across all New England sports. Should the Patriots consider bringing in Ashton Genty for a visit to get the Raiders or Bears interested in a trade up for him? It would seem unfair to the player if you have no intention of taking him. Just wondering if teams have employed this strategy to your knowledge. Absolutely. I mean, they go through, all sorts of crap. They'll get people that'll leak stuff about they have interest in this guy, trying to get somebody to come up. Do I really think that the Raiders or the Bears would be spooked by the Patriots to come up for a running back, even though I love Genty? If I were them, I'd be like, all right, you can have them. I'll take a Hampton out of North Carolina, who I think is a tremendous talent as well. So, yeah, they could play the games. And again, I said that if the Patriots think that like a guy like Genty or Tyler Warren is that good of a prospect, that they are clearly the highest rated players on the board, then take them. Yeah, I have no problem if they take them. I wouldn't do it. But if they came out and they said, if Vrabel comes out after the draft, after they draft Genty at 4, and he said, look, we love Mondre, we love Antonio Gibson, but Ashton Genty was the number 1 player on our board, regardless of position, and we just couldn't pass on that. I'm not going to rip the guy for it. I don't know how you feel about it, Nick.
No, I wouldn't rip him. And as far as Genty goes, an fair look. It's lying season. It's silly season. The stuff that you're going to read and hear over the next 2 weeks, especially, is questionable at best. And what I would say is, as far as Genty's side of this, that's why you've got agents. Trust me when I tell you, if the agent is a good agent and the agent is doing his or her job, they let Genty know that. Like, oh, take the visit to the Patriots because you never know what's going to happen. You want to be in the room. You want to talk to Vrabel because, yeah, there's a chance that they might draft you. But, Ashton, we think it's more likely that you're taking this visit. So, be prepared for other questions that might be asked of you because this could be all maneuvering. So these guys are aware of the game. They all know the game. They all play the game. But taking a visit never hurts because you get in front of decision makers and you never know how that could impact your career in the future. All right, he's Greg. I'm Nick. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back early next week as we get closer to the draft. Until then, be well.